from the Dominican Republic. Today, we are coming together to talk about providing feedback and coaching to teachers during this distance. Okay. I know that we have friends that have already reached out to me to say, listen, I can't be there. Are you going to be posting this session afterwards like you do with your other sessions? Absolutely. We will make sure that we post this just like we do with all of the others. But I welcome everybody today, this Wednesday. We finally have a sunny day in Chicago. And so we are finally letting a little bit of light and air in this house for the first time in what feels like what probably is actually months. So I'm feeling good. Sort of dipped off there for a little bit, but that's okay. So welcome everyone. Hopefully everybody is doing well, regardless of where you are across the country, across the world. We will be monitoring the chat box as always. But today we want to go ahead and jump right in to providing feedback and coaching to teachers during this distance learning time. So we're going to move forward. You guys know that the first few pieces that I always share is if you are not looking to get a hold of us, please make sure you know how to get a hold of us or to connect with us on social media. Here is how you get a hold of us through LinkedIn, our Twitter handle, Facebook page, and you can get a hold of us directly at info@tajulearning.com. Please make sure to reach out with any questions and or just to stay in communication and getting updates on our different Taju Times video blog, different PD offerings, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. This is a repeat, as always, my good friends. I also always want to share the equity framework that's at the heart of everything that we do. It is definitely very strong through this sort of coaching and feedback session that we'll talk about today, but it's a strong theme for the session that we're going to do today because it's a strong theme that runs through everything that we do. I want you to think about coaching and feedback, particularly right now when some of us as coaches or administrators are really getting an opportunity to focus in on what's happening in the classroom for the first time in a very long time in our roles. Some of us that are coming from the district office, or some of us that are coming from administrative roles, we haven't had an opportunity to really focus on coaching and feedback to teachers in a long time. And I want us to really think about the heart of what this equity framework is as we're engaging with teachers, as we're giving them feedback about what we're seeing in their classrooms, ways that they can accelerate their student learning, et cetera, et cetera. And my co-facilitator, we're moving forward. I also like to share this one as one of those staples in every one of our sessions, right? Why is coaching and feedback important? Because our language learners are a protected group, under civil rights law. It is absolutely critical that we continue to provide teachers with feedback that allow teachers to best meet the needs of the language learners that they serve, particularly on our dual language and bilingual programs. And feedback is one of those ways that we can accelerate growth even while students are at home, rather than just relying on packets or apps that are going to do the job for us. And hope for success. Now is not a time for hope. Now is a time to really get laser focused on those areas that can accelerate growth for teachers and for their students. Okay, so here we are moving forward, my friends, and my co-facilitator. Mil gracias. Okay, so some of you have seen this, the 6 tasks to notice, and the framework that we utilize for observing, coaching, and providing feedback for teachers that serve dual language and bilingual classrooms and students, right? There are 6 tasks that really are sort of the guiding force of how we observe, how we gather data and information, how we interact with teachers, what we look for in order for us to find what the most critical feedback is that's going to provide the highest leverage, coaching, and subsequent support. The 6 tasks of notice are focused around environment and organization as number 1. Number 2, teacher and student interactions. Number 3, instructional strategies. Number 4, learning tasks. Number 5, cause and effect relationships. Number 6, student agency over learning. In this time of distance learning, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that the interactions, teacher-student interactions, along with learning tasks, are 2 of the most critical tasks of notice that can be leveraged right now for coaches to really look for high leverage areas to accelerate how teachers and students interact together and how students have continuity of learning, continuity of access to education within their program models, even while we are separated in our own homes, okay? So I want to make sure that those 2 tasks of notice, particularly the interactions that students have with their teachers and with each other, and with learning while they're away from their teachers and by themselves in their homes, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to dive deep into that, okay? Here we go. If we can move to the next, and for some reason I lost it on my end. There we go. Thank you. Sorry, me and my co-host are trying to make sure that we coordinate when we move things forward. Okay, so what are the type of interactions as a coach that we are looking for and are able to still provide feedback and coaching on within this framework? For student-teacher interactions, there are 4 key ones that we're looking for. Number 1 is that we're looking for affective interactions. Number 2, we're looking for the quality and effectiveness of the instructional interactions. Number 3, we're looking for the quality, effectiveness, and the match of language interactions. I want to also add that we're looking for the authenticity of language interactions. And finally, we're looking for the quality and the effectiveness of feedback interactions. These 4 interactions are things that are observable and can be leveraged whether or not we're in the classroom with our teachers and their students, or whether we've joined a small group or a whole group lesson, or whatever the case may be during this distance learning time. Okay, I want to make sure that I also focus in on number 5, which is the learning tasks. Okay, learning tasks are absolutely critical. And we've talked about this a few times, to be honest with you, in the Wednesday webinar series that we've done. Learning tasks are what students do, right? The activities that we've asked them to do while they are engaged in learning should, number 1, be aligned to grade level learning standards. We should not be giving students busy work, because particularly the older they get, the much more in tune they get and the much more aware they are to the fact that there is no value for their grade level learning or for their grade or intrinsic value for themselves, and the worthiness for them to engage in that task itself diminishes greatly, okay? The second piece of learning tasks is that students need access to both receptive and productive supports and activities like opportunities to practice, right? They should be given a wealth and variety of opportunities for them to receive language supports, right? To listen to people speaking, to read things in both languages of instruction. Okay? If it's a 90-10, we want to make sure that they have a great deal, right? A wealth of authentic opportunities to listen, see, and read native language print that reflects the language of instruction. Again, now more than ever, there are so many countries, cities, agencies around the globe that are opening access to their museums, to their print, to their YouTube videos. We have YouTube videos of us reading with our children, a range of books, right? So that students have a wealth of opportunities to engage with not only print literacy experiences, but other experiences that connect and engage them to learning tasks that reflect all the contents and disciplines, okay? Please make sure that if you want more examples of this, that you check out some of our previous webinars where we've given access to this, or that you look at some of the Facebook pages, and we'll make sure to provide links in addition to this PDF of this website to some of the Facebook resources that we've leveraged and sort of connected our partners to that provide school districts with a range and a host of different literacy, app, activities that students can work on in math, science, social studies, geography, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll make sure to include those links and those Facebook sort of groups that people can tap into to provide receptive learning, right? Receptive language where students can read and listen to tons of information in their native language. But not only that, but we also want to give students opportunities to engage in learning tasks that allow them to speak and write in both of the language systems if they're in a dual language program, okay? It should be reflective of the language allocation. So if you are in a 90-10 in a kindergarten, how often do your students have an opportunity to write and to speak in the lote, or in Spanish, or in Mandarin, or in Arabic, right? That reflects the program model. I want to stop there because that was a lot to take in. Okay. So I already have a question. Perfect. So one of the questions that I see is, what's the difference between instructional strategies, learning tasks, and teacher scaffolds? All right. So for example, an instructional strategy might be, let's see, like a model or a read aloud or así se dice or el dictado, right? In el dictado, I might be sharing a key sentence or line in a book, right? As a dictation for students to write. There's a purpose to that strategy, right? Particularly for our Spanish, English, dual language programs, there's a perceptibility. Can students hear and perceive the sounds of the word and in that way transcribe it, write the sentence accurately from what I said? Because there's a transparency to Spanish that makes el dictado a very powerful instructional strategy, right? There's a set of steps that teachers should utilize to make el dictado or an interactive read aloud or a range of other strategies. TPR, for example, is another instructional strategy, right? There's a range, a set of steps that make those strategies effective and well and accurately implemented, okay? Now that strategy might be utilized as a way to teach something, reinforce an objective, and then the student is going to engage in a learning task or an activity in order to apply what was learned through the use of that strategy. Does that make sense? Okay. Please let me know in the chat box if the distinction between a strategy and a learning task wasn't necessarily clarified. Okay. Now the scaffolds, okay, I want you to think of a scaffold like the scaffolds that we might see on the street or on the sidewalk for a building under construction, right? For students whose language is still under construction, they require scaffolds in order to bridge the gap between the learning that they have to master or they have to engage in and the proficiency level that they're currently at. The scaffold is the support that bridges that gap. And so sometimes they are going to need visual scaffolds. Sometimes it's a picture that we provide them. Sometimes it's a visual or a graphic scaffold. We give them a graphic organizer, or we give them a timeline or modified notes or something like that. Sometimes it's an interactive scaffold. Maybe we pair them, we give them bilingual pairs, or we allow them to work cooperatively so that they have another support that's in place, right? So the strategy is what teachers utilize to teach the objective of the lesson. It's well matched to the purpose of learning for the day. The task is what students do to apply that learning, right? And the scaffold are those supports that are necessary in order to bridge the gap between students' proficiency level and access to grade level learning and the ability to show what it is that they can do with that grade level learning, okay? In last week's presentation, I shared an infographic that I often use from a colleague and peer around the 3 different types of scaffolds and why they're really purposeful and meaningful and how they help students across all 3 of those that are aligned, again, yes, to the WIDA scaffolds or supports, okay? Are there any other questions, comments, struggles with that piece right now? I'm gonna pause really quickly. Please feel free to also unmute yourself and make this a natural conversation. Okay. And here I am, I'm terrible because I'm squinting because I have no idea where I left my glasses, just so everybody knows. All right, here we are, my friends. The last piece before I sort of jump into the interactions around learning tasks is that for learning tasks, we really want to provide teachers with feedback around how they are leveraging authentic practices that allow, or learning tasks that allow students to integrate math, science, social studies, literacy, and language production, utilizing things that tap into the resources that they already have access to in their homes. Okay? If we are solely relying on our digital resources that are disconnected to the real world in which our students live, we are missing out on critical ways to accelerate learning and minimize the gaps that we face when we come back in the fall. That is one of the most important things that we can really look for and look to in terms of their learning tasks. Okay, how integrated and authentic are they to encompass all of the content areas, utilizing the things that they already have at their fingertips? How can they find math concepts right there in their home? How can they practice writing around things that they're already discussing the oracy that they already have in their homes. That's a critical piece of feedback for our coaches to really leverage during this time, okay? I wanna make sure that we leave enough time to shift into something that is absolutely critical, which are the interactions, okay? We talked about this in the very beginning. There are 4 noticings for coaches when it comes to student and teacher interactions. They are affective, instructional, language, and feedback interactions. Effective interactions right now are observable when we jump into online learning sessions, small group sessions, et cetera, and there are things that are knowable that we can provide concrete and accurate feedback to our teachers in order to ensure that our students are supported. The reason why affective interactions in general are so critical is that they increase the self-confidence, lower anxiety, and remove mental barriers and mental blocks that impact and impede engagement and learning. That is always the case. But especially right now, we have to be mindful of our students, not only their physical well-being, but their mental and emotional well-being. With each week that passes, we know that it's necessary to keep students safe, but it also plays a huge role in students' sort of a connection to school and their mental stability, mental wellness, their feelings, their positive feelings about school, about engaging in things that are hard, in things like persistence with work that is difficult for them. Because yes, thank you for sharing. Many of our students not only are going through the trauma of isolation, but they're also going through a range of traumas that none of us fully know within each one of their homes. Whether it's they've been touched by COVID-19 directly, or I've heard many stories that break my heart. I still get, me da calambre, right? Of the stories that I've heard that students have lost family members or loved ones, and because of the stay-at-home orders, they haven't been able to either attend the funeral or go to the country where their families or loved ones are currently at to pay their respects and find some sense of closure. There are so many different ways that our kids are struggling through trauma right now, that these affective interactions and explicit planning and integration of these affective interactions are critical. They're critical for their wellness, but also for students to be able to continue their learning journey. I want us to think of looking for very specific observable pieces within those teacher-student interactions when you observe in their classrooms, okay? We can look for things like teacher eye contact, smiling. An important one is the accurate use of students' names. If my name is Alexandra, it is Alexandra. If my name is something else that is very difficult to pronounce, I, as the teacher, it is my job and my role not to regress or have a name that we adapt for the student to make it easier for us, but to make sure that we honor and value the importance and role of a name for students to say, I see you, I know that that's part of your identity, okay? That's something that teachers can absolutely practice. They can practice even with the kids. And that makes kids feel good to know that even if it's hard for you, that teachers are also willing to put in the work to honor the identities of their students. We can make sure that we're utilizing body language that shows warmth, interest, and caring. I can't tell you the amount of times that I have been observing in lessons and I've heard like tapping on the table that shows impatience, or that the teacher is looking away, doing something different, that communicates something to students, okay? Naming and recognition of students' background knowledge and the use of things from their home and culture. We want teachers to celebrate and integrate students' knowledge of the application of learning to things in their home. We want to encourage teachers to make sure that we build up students and that we celebrate their ability to make those connections to real world and to share with others all the different ways that learning concepts can be tied to the perspective of different cultures and different traditions from the families that are represented in our communities and in our classrooms. Finally, we want to make sure that our teachers are encouraging and naming academic and language risk-taking. It is so important for our students to take risks and try saying something, try doing something, particularly in this setting that still feels very unnatural for a lot of students, right? And the older we get, the more I see like this hesitation from students to actually take an academic risk. And so we want to make sure that we celebrate that and that we encourage that as part of the learning process, not just the content and language in this digital setting, okay? What I would like to take a moment to do is to just get some feedback from everybody that's on the call on this webinar. What are some of the ways that you have seen teachers or that you have personally tried to leverage affective interactions to improve the success, improve the engagement of your students? I'm looking in. I see a couple of us are already chatting in the chat box. Please definitely share your insights in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself. I get tired of hearing my own voice very quickly, my friends. Awesome. Classdojo is an absolutely wonderful way to share praises. If that's something that your students are already ready, sort of used to already, I have to admit that I'm a little bit older than I might look. And Classdojo was not one of those things that we utilized when I was still in the classroom. So it's something that's still new to me. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hope, for sharing with the group. Praising them with a note, especially with our high schoolers and middle schoolers. I'm seeing a lot of them as of about week 6, a lot of them just sort of retreated and just no longer really wanted to take those risks, especially verbally contribute during the live sessions that they were having in their small groups with their teachers. And so those little private notes that I saw teachers doing were so beautiful and well received by teachers. Like you could see the next week that they were already increasing the amount they were able and willing to take those risks because it felt good, even though middle schoolers sometimes don't necessarily want to admit it, they too need that piece. Let's see. Absolutely. Knowing also, thank you for sharing this. Knowing also like the different platforms that your students are tapped into. There are some students that have access to text messaging or cell phones or WhatsApp as an app. For those of us that have students with international parent backgrounds, sometimes just sending them a quick message on WhatsApp or through a text message is exactly what they need to keep them motivated and receiving that praise. Making sure that you share experiences, reinforce those experiences that bring back those sort of positive feelings, I think is an absolutely fabulous way. Thank you for sharing that. Even having students particularly to practice their oracy, practice their productive language skills, present things about their culture. Maybe it's something that they did with their families, something that they learned through doing an oral history with a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or something like that. Absolutely is a wonderful way to leverage those affective barriers and or filters. Making sure to leverage cognates, we'll get into that in just a second, to connect, right? new vocabulary, especially, or language structures between their two language systems. And I love this. Sending a note or a letter or a card or a little message via US mail. That is such a beautiful thing. I don't think a lot of our kiddos really know anything other than bills or junk mail, flyers that they get from different companies. Like the power of getting a handwritten card in the mail. I don't know the last time that most adults have received that. If you are a coach, I will tell you, when I was a coach and a building principal, I used to leave little handwritten notes or handwritten cards for my teachers that I coached and that I worked with. And to this day, I still hear from my teachers that I worked with years ago, decades ago, that they have those, they keep those, and that those were some of the only ones that they received. So those are powerful things that teachers can do with their students, but also in a coaching or an administrative role that we can be doing with the teachers that we coach as well. Because I think it's absolutely powerful to just not always be so tied to the digital tools, which we're now sort of dependent on, but also go back to sort of those more personal moments and interactions that we can, okay? Last, I wanna share such a wonderful idea is that just thinking about those natural spaces and times that we would have interactions with our students when we were in a physical building, like during lunch, in the hallways, et cetera, et cetera. I have a couple of schools with whom I work that they've tried to recreate like lunch bunches. And so it's just a time, it has nothing to do with content learning, but it's just a time for a small group of students and that teacher to share lunch together, regardless of where it is in the house. And it is building and maintaining those relationships that are so critical for students to maintain that strong relationship with the teacher and with the learning, so that they can continue to leverage the structures that were working for them in the physical building, okay? I wanna thank everybody for all the things that they shared. I'm gonna continue to read through these once we are off, and I will make sure that we include a list of all the ideas that were shared from others on this webinar once we post everything on the website and on YouTube. Go ahead, my friend. Ay, Dios mío, yo no sé lo que está pasando. I can't see the screen being shared again. If you can give me a thumbs up or let me know. Oh, there it is. Oh, here we are. Awesome. Okay, so language interactions are one of the other highest leverage places that we can make sure to provide feedback to teachers. Language interactions help ensure that students, while they're on the call, while they are live with their teachers, are provided accurate and effective, receptive and productive opportunities to interact with language, right? They should be able to hear and see rich language that are matched effectively with the content and the proficiency levels of their students. But not only that, but they should have an opportunity to share speaking and what they've written with their teachers around relevant topics, so that the topics that students are talking and writing about are engaging enough that it sort of does the heavy lifting, right? We don't want students to be navigating such foreign concepts, standards, and language during this very trying time and traumatic time already, and really expect that the limited time that they have with their teacher online is going to be the most powerful use of that interaction, right? There are some things that are absolutely observable, and there are some things that are knowable as we are observing instruction with our students, okay? Thank you, right? This idea of oracy as a leverage, right, is absolutely critical. We're not just going to read to students and expect them to write to us or give us a thumbs up or chat in the chat box. We have to hear them speaking as well, okay? It's absolutely critical for their development. So students can respond to teachers, right? Through visuals. Teachers can provide visuals. Teachers and students should have an opportunity to repeat multiple times during their interactions new words and new language stems that are going to need to be used after that interaction is over. There should be a focus on the words and the scaffolds that not only students need access to, but how they're going to use them once that live interaction is over. There should be an explicit connection to how those scaffolds are not only used during the call, but after the call is over. Not only that, but we have to really think about the 4+1 language domains and how they're supporting each other. So 4+1, I want to make sure that I am very explicit about what the 4+1 are. So we have reading, writing, speaking, listening. Those are the 4 that we're used to. And then +1 is metalinguistic awareness. How are they studying and conscious of the language that they're using, right? They're spending so much time away from us that we need for students to be strategic and conscious language users, okay? Finally, how are we helping them engage in cross-linguistic connections where they're bringing both of their language systems together? Again, that's part of that +1 language domains that are going to support the first 4. They should have an opportunity to engage in, I don't know, maybe we're doing an así se dice, where students are considering, man, how would I say this in English? Or if I say it in English, how would I say this in Spanish or Mandarin? Not just translating it word for word, because most of us who are bilingual know there are very few things that translate literally word for word when we run them through Google Translate, right? But how do we also account for some of those nuances? How do we account for the cultural differences between how we say certain expressions even, okay? Not only that, but really thinking about the power of cognates and giving students some tools for how to identify the majority of words that appear to be cognates and actually are, versus those false cognates, which in reality are not that many of the cognates that they encounter, okay? I want us to pause right there again, because this is something that is so critical and provides particularly our dual language and bilingual teachers such effective feedback and coaching. We're gonna get to in our last little section, but I want to hear from everybody. What are some of the ways that you have seen your teachers, or that you as a teacher have been really leveraging language interactions to accelerate the growth and minimize the gaps that we have when we come back in the call for your student, or in the fall for your students? Absolutely. So my good friends, one of our friends on the webinar today says, thank you, Hope, that we can respond through translanguaging without sacrificing oracy. We can actually have students respond in an audio file. Pero yo no puedo hablar. Let me try that one more time. We can have our students respond using an audio file. For some of our students, they have audio recording capabilities right there on their cell phones, on their iPads or their Chromebooks, if they're utilizing a device from the school. They have a range of things. They can utilize Flipgrid so that they can record themselves with or without using their faces. If they're sort of shy to turn on their cameras, which I know some of our families, the kids aren't necessarily shy to have their face be on the camera, but their families have requested that they not turn the camera on for whatever reasons, right? We can do a lot of talking and utilizing of sentence stems using Zoom, or if you are not a Zoom district, you can utilize Google Classroom, which also allows for the same thing sort of structure, right? Jasmine shares that we can be, I do this all the time in the PD that we've been doing ever since we've had schools closed. I have anchor charts all over my house, all over my walls, and we can be having that posted in the background while we're working with students. We can be utilizing pictures right there in the camera or on our anchor charts, et cetera, et cetera. I thank you for that. There was one teacher that I saw that was utilizing their bathroom as an anchor chart, and because it's really easy to just write in the shower wall, whatever the material was, that had turned into her anchor charts, her whiteboard for teaching and learning for the day. I don't know that I would necessarily use my own bathroom because I don't clean it as much as clearly this young lady does. But I think it's absolutely wonderful that we're stepping outside of the box to think about different ways that we can do that. Keep poster charts that we can refer back to again and again. Absolutely. The other piece that we should really consider is making sure that whatever we do that provides sort of how students are going to utilize these scaffolds from the lesson into class, that we communicate, or into their homes after class, that we communicate that with their families as well. It can be as simple as we share that, we text that, we take a picture of that, add it to Google Classrooms, we share it and send it in the email and text message and WhatsApp to our parents, our families, to what some of my friends in North Carolina have done, which is that they have a television station where they have different segments on the news stations, on public TV, where they are sharing, this is how we did it with your student, here's a picture of what the anchor chart looks like, and here's how you can do it and practice it at home as well, okay? Thank you very much for your ideas, my good friends. Again, we will make sure to sort of compile a list of this and share it out when we share the link to the video on YouTube and on our website as soon as we are done with the live call. And we are on to the next. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces that we always consider when we consider what we do about this, right? It's one thing to identify what these things are that are observable and knowable when we're observing classrooms during their live sessions with students. It's another thing to say, how do we organize this to provide them with feedback, and what do we do about it, okay? Number one is that not part of this slide at all, and not part of this presentation, but part of the entire framework from which this comes from, is the idea that we have to be very, very clear about the foundational sort of essentials that we have to build with teachers in order to have a foot to stand on to give them effective feedback, right? Because not only are teachers going to be looking for whether or not they see the value in your feedback to actually incorporate it as something that's going to improve their interactions and improve the quality of instruction that they have with their students, but they're going to need to know that A, they can trust you as somebody giving them feedback, that B, you already have a relationship to leverage in order to maximize that feedback and to say, hey, I was in your classroom, I noticed this, I wanted to share some feedback with you, right? And number three, that you are transparent in the fact that you are observing instruction for the purpose of providing them with feedback that's going to support and improve their growth and the growth of their students. I think more than anything else, from those essentials, right, that come from our full framework, those three pieces are absolutely critical. Do you have a relationship with your teachers? Are you actively working to maintain a relationship with your teachers as a coach? Do you have trust and confidence? Are you actively working to maintain or build greater trust and confidence with them during this pandemic and the further that we maintain our distance from each other. And number 3, are you transparent with your goals for observing, right? A lot of times we pop in and out without necessarily being fully transparent in the fact that we are there to see how things are going, but to also provide critical insight, like a mirror, right? Reflecting back to teachers how effective their teaching moves and their interactions were, and ways that they can improve that moving forward. In the end, we really have to think about, especially when it comes to the learning tasks and the interactions, what are the small problems that we can solve and help them solve? Or what are those pieces that can potentially have a large effect size if the teacher makes that change, okay? We have specifically chosen those 2 tasks of notice because during this time especially, okay, they have a large effect on systematic changes for the teacher, which means a large effect on the potential impact that it has for students. Does that make sense? Okay, please let me know if for any reason this does not make sense. Okay, I'm gonna move forward. All right. Amongst that, not todavía no. Gracias, co-facilitator. Okay, now, if we identify interactions, learning tasks, or engagement, to be honest with you, right? As one of those things that's sort of a large effect size area that requires feedback, that requires coaching, we have to make sure that we provide them with the capacity building efforts to improve that area, okay? Now, for some of us, we have the capacity to support teachers in how we do that. We have our own expertise in either linguistic supports or cross-linguistic connections, or how authentic those interactions are, or even logically, how to improve, right, their affective interactions so that they can decrease like what those barriers look like. For those of us that don't necessarily have the internal capacities, right now more than ever, it's times for us to start curating online supports that are available through free webinars, through different organizations, and through online PDs, through book studies, through professional resources, whether they're books or whatever the case may be, right? For your teachers to be matched up with that really target those areas that they need to be improving. But I want us to really take this opportunity right now, before the school year is over, and to match them for the summertime with effective professional learning that's gonna build their capacity, build their effectiveness around those areas that we've identified as areas of growth. Because I'm gonna tell you, when we come back in the fall, I can almost guarantee that all of us across the country and across the globe, I know that we have some international friends on our call today, that we're gonna be very hard pressed to be pulled out of the classroom, to be pulled out of the building for really strategic, really capacity building efforts, professional supports, once we are back with our students. There's too many unknowns, and the reality is that we've spent so much time away with our students that once we are back together with our students, they're gonna need us and the stability that our presence requires during that time. So we've got to leverage the time that we have now to really think strategically about how we match them through online webinars, conferences, professional readings, free webinars, and or online digital PDs, okay? Now, obviously, I'll share what we have. We've shared this previously. It's also available on our website. Ya tú sabes, Amanda. All right. These are the professional sort of capacity building, professional development opportunities that we have already transitioned to our online platform. We utilize a blended learning sort of combination for us through Canvas, which is an online platform that allows us the flexibility to use very secure learning, digital learning, with combined face-to-face live sessions like we're doing here on Zoom. It's just through their very secured platform. We support dual language leadership overview to help schools that are still in their design phase. It's a Design Your Institute. We work with our districts through the curriculum mapping and dual language programs. How do we ensure an instructional planning process that aligns to all three pillars from the get-go? The module that this is from, this is sort of a brief abridged webinar of the coaching teachers in bilingual and dual language classrooms that we do the full institute, as well as coaching for particularly our leaders, our building leaders and our district leaders. ELD, ELA, regardless of what program model you have, you should have some type of English language development that's literacy based and authentic, that's integrated into your program. We have the Equity is Not a Bumper Sticker Institute that we have already transitioned. This one is one that is best for building leaders and those students or those teachers and teacher teams that really do support diverse student bodies. How do we really think about our own practices that pose challenges and barriers? It's about our teacher and adult lens, not necessarily the diversity that our students bring and the lens that they bring to us, but how do we utilize that and tap into that as a resource, not as a deficit. And then obviously we provide one-to-one coaching and technical support as well. Those are the pieces that we currently have already transitioned that can be solid matches for our buildings and districts as you're identifying challenges. But I also encourage you to reach out to a range of organizations to think about professional readings. We will also, like I said, we will make sure that we post a list of the ideas and some of the Facebook groups that are just out there providing a range of resources and tools, links, ideas that have been really, really powerful that can align to the needs that you identify for your teachers as you engage and observe with them, okay? And last but not least, you all always know, if you want to get a hold of us, please do not hesitate to reach out. Or if you want copies of this, more about different resources that we have available, to our website, which is www.tajulearning.com, or to email us at info@tajulearning.com. As always, and I don't know how this possibly happened, this is the first webinar, Wednesday webinar, that we actually ended on time. I think it helped that I was speed talking the entire way through. I apologize. Thank you for the thumbs up. If you have any questions, any wonderings, please do not hesitate. As always, I will stay on for an extra 5-10 minutes online. And then please email us for additional questions, or if we need to follow up with a separate conversation around any other pieces that we talked about today. Thank you, everyone. Les mando, mira, te estoy mandando abrazos y besos y todo. Yay! Wonderful. You are welcome, my friends. I thank everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Adiós.
Gracias.
De nada, como a la orden.
Seguimos bailando aquí.